Happiness is freedom. Freedom is having the choice to spend your time doing things that inspire you. Most people want freedom, but many people don't have a clear objective, a roadmap, or a strategy to achieve it. Everyone deserves to live an inspired and free life. I believe that when we're free and able to focus on our most meaningful work, we simply become better human beings. We can give more, care more, support more, and love more. I'm an investor, a trader, and an entrepreneur, and I get to spend every day doing what I love. At the age of 29 years old, I became financially free, and since then my mission has been to help and inspire other people to achieve the same so that they can be more of who they really want to be. Always Free is about having a free mind, being free to question the status quo, free to take risks, free to say no, free to say yes, free from social idealisms, opinions and beliefs, free to disobey, and free to wake up every day and spend your time to make a difference that inspires you. You can have it all. Living a life designed by you isn't a stroke of luck or a result of circumstance. It's a choice. So if you want to learn how to become free and live an inspired life, join me for the #1 show for financial empowerment and wealth creation as I share my insights, tips, strategies and advice on what allowed me to be always free. Welcome to the show. I'm your host, Jason Graystone. Well, welcome back to Always Free. This is the #1 show for financial empowerment and wealth creation. And if it's the first time you're listening, welcome. If it's not the first time you're listening, definitely go back to episode 1 and start there, because I built this show in order for a reason, as I strategically take you through the steps it took me to become financially free from ages 22 to 29. So definitely go and check them out. But today you might as well stick around because we've got a very, very special show. This is going to be probably a little bit of a longer show because I'm joined by a very special guest, friend, partner, who's just a great guy. And many of you have asked questions about this particular individual as well in my messages, asking about, what he does and how can you find out more. And not only that, I've always had a lot of questions about fatherhood, balancing family life, habits, routine, managing business, entrepreneurship around family. And kind of what I thought would be great to do is get this guest on because he's in a similar situation as me. In fact, we're working on a business together, so he's pretty much in exactly the same spot as me. And we're just going to rabbit hole. We're going to deep dive on some of the topics that are a bit more vulnerable, stuff that you don't normally see from me, and I think from him as well. So please welcome Sebastian Bates. How you doing, Seb?
Hey, mate. Great to be here. Thank you for having me on.
It's great to have you, mate. So for those who haven't had the pleasure of hearing a little bit about you, just give us a brief introduction on who you are, what you do. Who's Seb Bates?
Yeah, sure. So I'm an entrepreneur. I'm the founder of the Warrior Academy, which is a global martial arts organization that specializes in character development for young people. We have 10 offices across 3 continents. We teach around 4,000 kids per week, and 50% of our students are from developing countries. We've just launched a charity called the Bates Foundation, so kind of half my work is the commercial side of what we do, and the other half of my work is more the philanthropy and expanding our program abroad and overseas. I've got multiple other businesses that I run here in Dubai as well. And so yeah, father of 2, ex-extreme sports athlete, ex-professional fighter, and just living in Dubai and exploring the options and the business opportunities around here.
Awesome. Excellent. And obviously we'll talk more about this as we go through, but first question that I wanted to kick things off with is a really kind of smash in the face question, and it's why business? Why entrepreneurship? Like why did you even do it? Why are you in it?
It's a really good question. Why entrepreneurship? And it's interesting because when I grew up, often if you look back hundreds of years, you kind of did what your parents did, right? If your dad was a baker, you were a baker. If your dad was a plumber, you were a plumber, and so on, right? And so for me, both of my parents were from government jobs. Mum was NHS. Dad was army, and so that was the kind of expected norm for our family, but also I think, that was the kind of path I was headed down as well. I always looked at my parents as very, very hard working. My mum was a full-time physiotherapist in the NHS with 4 kids. My dad was, he kind of worked his way up through the ranks in the army, all the way up to colonel. But certainly in my childhood, he was often away a lot, 6 months at a time, on exercise or at war or whatever it was. And so, my childhood was a lot of moving around in busy state schools with the army, and then moving to the countryside. And so, living in the countryside, I'd never seen an entrepreneur before, right? The closest thing I saw to an entrepreneur was maybe someone working at the post office. And so for me, it was a really bizarre, concept of, how could you do that? And it was not something I had been taught, right? I was certainly on the treadmill, the A-level uni treadmill, I call it. And I think for me, I kind of figured out that I wanted to do things differently when I was sat there in sixth form, and they showed, this guy came in from UCAS. And for me, the UCAS guy who was explaining university and all the options at uni just seemed like a salesperson. And I felt like I caught onto something which no one else in the room had. It was like this guy was selling uni to us. And all the conversations in the school all dictated towards, where are you going to go to uni? Not are you going to go to uni? It's like, what degree are you going to study? What job are you going to get? And so at the time I was in the Royal Marines Reserve. Every weekend I was shooting, training, running, doing assault courses down in Livingston and in Bristol. And all my, at the age of 16, 17, all my friends were kind of mid-30s. It was like I had 20 big brothers. So I grew up very, very, very quickly, right? I socialized around 30-year-olds from the age of 17, for a good couple of years. That was my social group, that was my peer group. And so that built a lot of resilience in me. And obviously the kind of arduous training and stuff you go through when you go through Royal Marine training it kind of shaped my mentality as well, alongside the martial arts side. But eventually I left because I wanted to go to uni, as I was on that kind of treadmill, but I didn't want to go to uni in the UK and get loads of debt. And so, being half Danish, I realised that I could study university in Denmark for free. And actually anyone in the EU, pre-Brexit, could do this, right? And so I started a university course in Denmark. But to kind of break that down, long story short, I guess around a year into that university course, I realised that I wanted freedom. I wanted to explore. I wanted to travel. And so, studying 8 hours a day, and then I was washing dishes 6 hours a day every night. And I realised this, it wasn't for me, and I wanted adventure. So I pretty much bought a one-way ticket to India. And this, for me, was like the turning point at which I started to understand entrepreneurship. I had no money, and I was traveling around India, around Asia. I was sleeping on trains at night to save money in hotels. I was creating opportunities to earn money wherever I went, right? So, sometimes I would be, bringing tourists to hotels so I could get free accommodation. Sometimes I would be, at full moon parties in Thailand, I'd rent 4 or 5 bungalows and then sublet them out to people during the busy weeks. And I was fighting semi-professionally in some of the boxing rings in the tourist areas in the islands in Thailand to earn money and food and accommodation, that sort of stuff. And pretty much wherever I went, I was looking for opportunities all the time to earn money, to carry the adventure on, right? So entrepreneurship for me started to become very clear as a system of solving problems. And so I guess for me it was like, okay, now I understand entrepreneurship. It's just problem solving. That's all it is. And there's a way in which you understand problems and really get into the deep pain of why those problems exist. And I think that's as how you level up as an entrepreneur, right? You get better and better at solving, problems, but the problems grow in size. Yeah. You solve bigger problems, you get a bigger reward. But also you get much quicker at solving those problems as well, I think, as you learn the process. So that's what entrepreneurship kind of started for me. It was all the adventure of traveling which kind of kicked it all off.
And the thing that kept it going was this idea that you could solve problems to pay for a lifestyle that you wanted, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Control of your lifestyle.
Yeah, definitely. I think for a lot of business owners, when you ask the question of why business, right, it's typically down to freedom, but it's almost got to be more than that, because it's like I saw this post on Facebook the other day, which was something along the lines of, I'm going to start my own business so that I've got more spare time or more free time or whatever, right? And I think the reality for anyone who started a business knows that is not the case. When you start a business, you kind of accept the fact that you're going to be working, 100 hours a week for less than minimum wage, most likely, right? And so And so yeah, that was a big kind of shift for me. Moving into launching my own business, I realised you have to really put in time, and so your freedom kind of dips for a bit, but at least you're kind of doing it on your own terms. And I love the idea that I could throw my creativity into building something and creating something, and that felt like freedom, right? It was freedom of creativity. And at the beginning, you have less freedom of time, you have less freedom of money than you would if you had a job, but you do have freedom of creativity, and for me, that's a big game changer.
Yeah, that's really. I mean, there's a lot to unpack there, going back from school, because funny enough, when the careers advisor came into our school, I felt the same. I felt like it was I saw the guy as an employee himself, and he was pitching something that was like, they were glazing over the important stuff. Like, they were just saying, what do you want to do? You know, well, how the hell do I know what I want to do? I have no idea. And I've got 2 boys now, and I think, you know, they wouldn't have a clue what they want to do when they were the age that I was when I was being asked that question, but they'll have more of a clue than I did, because I just wasn't being guided by anyone. Like, I got asked the other day, you know, have I achieved all my ambitions as a kid? And to be honest, I didn't have any ambitions as a kid. I grew up around people who just had no ambition. It was like, you know, my parents weren't kind of aspirational people. The people I grew up around weren't aspirational. I wasn't exposed to any level of greatness, or I didn't look up to anyone. You know, the most excited I got was when the ice cream van came around the estate, and I really didn't. I didn't have any ambitions. There were things I loved, and it was like, you know, I loved filmography, and I loved things like that. There was kind of music, you know, things that still carry on to be a thread through my life today, but I didn't have any of that. But I did have this feeling that I didn't want to be like everyone else on that estate, and including my parents. And I think that was just in me. And a lot of people say, like, is it born, or is it taught, or can you learn it, and all this kind of stuff. I think there's an argument to both, because I do think you can learn entrepreneurship. It sounds like you, through your character development, learn about, you know, solving problems. But the fact that you're solving problems and doing that kind of stuff, and you know, and influencing people to carry their luggage or whatever it was, that is in you. You know, that is in you. And I think some people don't have that. Some people don't have the work ethic to go and get a little bit uncomfortable and sleep under a train, you know, even if that's kind of a metaphor for it. But you can't learn that. You know, I don't believe you can learn that. There are lazy people. Like, there are lazy people. And I say lazy, and they're probably not lazy in other things. But I think there is what am I trying to say? There's a difference between people who, like, you put on a base suit and go and jump off a cliff, and to some people that would just be like, no, absolutely no way, right? As the same way as someone would want to get up at 5 a.m. and go and do a favor for someone for a month for not getting paid, versus someone who would just want to sleep in till 10. And I think, yeah, what are your thoughts? Can you learn it? Can you earn it? Like, what?
Yeah, I mean, nurture versus nature, right? I think like everything in life is not black and white. It's pretty grey. I think there are certain people, and it's just in their blood, right? Like, entrepreneurship is just in their blood. They would rather be. It's not even about the money. It's not even about the time. They just want to be, you know, putting themselves in a position where they're creating, and they're, you know, and I see it as a very creative thing. You know, like I said, growing up, I was very creative as well. You know, I wanted to study architecture. You know, I used to love drawing a lot when I was younger, and, you know, I enjoyed music, and it was finding a channel for that creativity. And I think entrepreneurs are creative at heart, right? Quite creative souls. So I think it's creative problem solving, right? But I think for a lot of people, they are born with it, and it's like there's no way you could, you know, say to them, here's what you're doing for the next 30 years. Like, they would have a heart attack. You know, when I sat down with my uni professor in Denmark, and I said to her, look, where am I going to be? She was like, you look a bit like, you know, demotivated. And I said, well, where am I going to be in the next 20 years? If I really work my ass off, where am I going to be? And she painted this picture for me, and it was like, now I know where I'm going to be. And it doesn't really matter what she did, what she said, you know, the fact that this is actually going to be it. And it didn't blow my mind. It was like, okay, cool, well, I'll do really well, I'll earn this much, I'll be in this job, you know, maybe I'll get to this point. You know, it's like, one of the things I really struggle with planning big goals. When I was asked by a mentor to plan my 10-year moonshot, I really struggled to do it because I went through this phase in entrepreneurship where I could only plan a year out, and now I plan 100 years out, right? And now I've started this charity which I want to outlive me, and I'm planning for that. But the reality is, it's like, the reason I struggled with that is because I didn't have big enough goals, and people really, they underestimate what they can achieve long term and overestimate what they can do short term, right? And so for me, it was like any big goal just sounded unrealistic. So I think I was very much pulled towards entrepreneurship because of the uncertainty, because it was like, I had the ability to change my future and to be anywhere, and for me, a big part of it's the adventure, right? And as difficult as heartbreaking lockdown and COVID was, looking purely from an entrepreneur side, right, the business side, and for me that really showed who was in it because it was in their blood, and who for some people this is just like their business was a temporary thing, and the second they got locked down, they lost their business, they gave up and they went and got a job. For some people, they were like, that's it. For other people, and I know for me, we pretty much lost the entire business over lockdown. And it was like entering the extreme sports arena of business, right? And I was in this room during lockdown about 15, 16 hours every day, whiteboards, writing on papers, just notes all over the whole room like a mad scientist, creating solutions to problems that I saw around me, new problems that were coming up for business owners in particular that I was helping. And so I think if it's in you, it's in you, right? And you have to explore that, and anything else just seems uncomfortable to pursue. But also, it's a very predictable thing, right? You can learn the skills of entrepreneurship and become a good entrepreneur. I really believe that, understanding and learning about your customers' problems, you don't need some special talent or gift to do that. You just need to know, right, you've got to have these meaningful conversations. You've got to dig into the problems. When you think you've got the problems, there's probably, you need to go even deeper than that. You need to collect the data. There's all these very black and white things you can do to become a better entrepreneur. So, but there is that, like you said, right, that level of grit and perseverance. And like you mentioned, some people are just lazy, they haven't got that. And then what's also interesting, because I know we spoke about this loads before, you're only really lazy with something if it's not part of your values, right? Like if that's a deep part of your values of who you are, you're not lazy to do it. And one of the great examples you've once given me is, if your child is playing video games, if they're really applying themselves to that, that's because they're able to do that, but they're not able to do the homework. Well,
they're not lazy in that, are they?
They can do 15 hours on the computer game and get from level to level to level and persevere, even though they're dying every other level and having to really focus on trying to solve that problem. It's because that's tied into their values, right? They really enjoy that. Exactly. When you enjoy it, you don't mind pursuing it. And so, despite financially COVID being like a bit of a letdown from a business point of view, it was the most exciting creative year of my life, and so
it transformed the trajectory of your business for sure.
I'll never forget what you said to me actually, and just when I pretty much lost the business, I was like, oh man, we've literally, I was in Johannesburg with Dr. DiMartini, took the last flight home, and I said they've shut down everything. Health inspectors that come to our clubs shut down everything. To keep all of my team, I've got to start a new business. So we actually started a new business together during lockdown, so I could make an income, so I didn't have to take any money out of the Warrior Academy, so that I could support the team, so we could keep all the staff there. But I'll never forget what you said, which was, COVID is going to be the kind of make or break it time for you. It's going to be the most important year of your life. And I think from a business point of view, that was great advice, because it really, really was, right? It really made us. We went from making about 200,000-300,000 pounds a year to over 3 million in an 18-month period because of COVID, because of how we responded during that time, right? So it was a crazy year. It really was like shining the torch on what entrepreneurship really meant to people for me.
Yeah, amazing, man. So look, there was we said it can't be. So parts of it can be learned, parts of it can be earned, and there's the kind of grit. But there's also another category, which is what you mentioned earlier about goals. They kind of overestimate what's achievable in a short period of time, and then they underestimate what's achievable in, say, 1 to 5 years. And that's where the magic happens, right? That's where the real kind of exponential growth takes place. And you mentioned goals and, seeing as far ahead as possible. And I'm a massive advocate for this as well. Having a bigger goal that keeps you focused. But then, a lot of entrepreneurs struggle with not getting results, not getting or not even knowing, because you've got the belief system that you've done it, and you've done it again and again and again, and you bet on yourself with confidence because of that, right? Whereas people just starting out, maybe listening to this show, or maybe early in their journey, or maybe they're going through a struggle now that they haven't been through before in their business, and they're uncertain about the outcome. How do they get the confidence? Via goals, habits, making sure that you have got a bigger vision, and tracking whether you are on track to that. What's some of the things that you do in order to make sure that you're feeding that back to yourself day to day to eventually hit the big goal?
So I think for me, it's, I tie everything to character development, right? And I see it in business owners more than ever. For me, character development is lots of small decisions every day and lots of big events, right? Memorable big events. And one of the most important factors in everything you just said for me is becoming a reliable person to yourself. Because I really feel like most people just don't trust themselves. And the reason for that is they break their promises, right? You set yourself a goal. Like, I'm going to phone up 10 people every day. And then one day you don't do it. Right? What does that tell you? You're always coaching yourself. You've always got a coach, an inner coach who's mentoring you without you realizing, right? There's always a voice going on in your head. What that tells you, if you break your own promises, is it tells you that you're not a reliable person. And you're watching yourself without realizing, and you're realizing that when you set goals, you don't achieve them, because you don't have the discipline to do it, right? Now, what's really, really important is you set goals that are achievable, that you can stick to, that aren't too unrealistic in the short term. And what's really vital is that if you say you're going to do it, you get it done. And this is for me, this transcends to everything I do. And I'm almost a bit of a weirdo about it, because I literally will not break a promise to anyone, because I know the long-term effect that has on me, right? If we plan to have dinner with friends, and let's just say something comes up and there's loads of work going on or whatever, and I'm really stressed and it's going to be hard for me to make it, I will not break that promise. If I say I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it. And if I'm going to be there at that time, I'm going to be there at that time. And it goes from personal life into business life, into your training, the way you train yourself physically. If you say you're going to do 10 press-ups every day, and you do 9, you're not a reliable person. You don't trust yourself, and over time, that has a massive impact on your confidence. An easy way to kind of hack that for me is do more than you say, right? So I've got a personal trainer, and I was speaking to someone in the changing room, right? And actually, in fact, you were there as well in Dubai.
I was there.
And we were sat down, and none of us really wanted to talk because we just had a horrendous leg session. And this guy was talking to us, and he basically said, my tactic is when they tell me to do 15 reps, at about 10 reps, I pretend I'm really tired, so that they kind of stop the set at 15. And for me, my mindset's completely opposite. If the trainer says to me, do 15 reps, I'm thinking in my head, how can I do 20? Right? I'm like, how can I do more than they asked for? Because if you trust your mentors and you trust the experts, and the experts tell you to do this, and you break it down into daily goals, and you always go that little step further. In the Warrior Academy, we call it 4% more. If you just do 4% more, just a little bit more than you're asking yourself to do, then ultimately you're going to get there a lot faster, and there's no way you can fail, right? It's like you take that massive goal and you break it down, as we all know, into small goals, but the missing ingredient here is A, never ever miss a rep, and B, try and do an extra couple of reps. And whatever it is, business, whether it's personal life, whether it's training, whatever it is, right? Yeah. And I think that has a massive compounding effect. You do that for a year, you're a different person. You do that for 5 years, you're in a whole different environment. Your existence has changed.
Yeah. Yeah, I kind of tell my kids this as well, and there's something where you say you're weird about it. I always have this thing in my head, like, if I don't do this, that's what I'm going to accept at every level of my life, and that is like, I will fail at everything if I don't do this one thing, and that's the level you take it to. Whether I'm in the gym, if I don't do this press up, I'm a useless father, that kind of thing. It goes through our head. It's like, Well, that's the example I'm setting. Yeah, that's the example I'm setting. Yeah. And I always say to my kids, like, anything you do throughout your life, when it gets a little bit tough, just imagine that there is thousands of other people in that exact situation on that particular time doing exactly the same thing as you, and they've got the same goal. And just by keep pushing, 90% of those people are not going to do it. So just by keep doing it, you are now in the top 10%. And then you get to the next challenge and there's 1,000 people there, right? And then you just go, right, I'm just going to keep doing it. And 90% of the people give up. And that is literally how it works. You know, what I've seen from people taking actions from my email list to, you know, people taking success rates in entrepreneurs and traders and investors, it is a 1 to 10%. Like that's the people that do well, and the rest don't. And they either give up because it's too hard, or they give up because they realize it wasn't for them, or they give up because it's really uncomfortable for them for some part of it. And it's a continuous game of like, how far do you want to push? And the thing you said about having a bigger goal, that's why it's so important about having a bigger goal, a bigger vision. Because when you've got this massive vision of what you want your life to look like, that then keeps you less distracted. It keeps you pushing on, making the kind of little notches each day, and you know, eventually you get there. It's inevitable. So
it's do you know what?
It's great mindset.
It's totally about mindset, and business is like you know, extreme personal development, really, isn't it? And for me, it's relentless accountability. It's holding yourself to a certain standard, right? And as you and I both know, you know, it's all about what you tolerate in life. If you tolerate having, you know, poor health, or you know, you tolerate not being in good shape or not having a good diet, then your body and everything around you in your life will kind of mesh towards that, right? And so for me, it's about having high standards for yourself, setting high standards, not just in the kind of the business side of what you do, but in everything in life, right? It's like, these are the standards I set, and having a really strong moral conviction towards that, right? You know what I say about not bailing on people, not letting people down, not flaking.
Yeah.
Like for me, that's just having strong moral conviction. This is who I am. These are the rules I live by, and I think that if you start living at the very core of your existence based on these sorts of morals and these sorts of rules, then the goals, the business goals, the physical goals, the personal goals, that's the next layer on top, right? But it's starting, and for me, that's what we call a black belt character. It's like everything stems from your character, all your values, all your decisions. Yeah. You know, you could be an amazing business owner, or you could be, you know, really high flying executive in a business, or you could, you know, be a sports person, or you know, a dad with 6 kids. It doesn't really matter. Like at the end of the day, if you don't have that moral conviction, that strong character, which everything grows from, then you're not going to be performing at the best of that ability. Do you know what I mean? And it's literally going to reshape your whole entire life.
Absolutely. I work with a lot of people with their, you know, wealth building and personal finance and things like that. And one of the things I always say is I ask them to pull up a graph which represents the spending behavior in their bank accounts. And you can almost draw a line, you know, at the bottom where it kind of dips down to. And I say, those big spikes that you got, what were they? And they say, well, that's where I got a bonus, or I worked overtime and I worked really hard for it. And I say, right, okay, but that only happens every now and then. And they say, yeah. And I say, well, what's your dream income? And they say something like, I don't know, 200 grand, 300 grand. And I say, well, that spike is a trajectory to achieve that. I said, but you only get it every now and then. And I say, if that's your goal, it's great to have goals, but you don't always hit your goals, right? But what you do always do is hit your standards. And that's the bottom line at the bottom, which the thing bounces off every time. And I say, it's not, like I say, when did you last take a pay cut? And they're like, I wouldn't take a pay cut. I'm like, well, there you go, right? So it's not about the goals, it's about raising the standards. Like, it's raising the minimum, like, acceptable. That's what it's about, raising the minimum acceptable. And then when you do that, your goals inevitably get hit because you're raising the floor. So it's not always about shooting for the moon. It's about actually raising your standards, and that you build a kind of staircase to the moon, if you like.
What's really interesting about your work is, you know, it's funny because I think a lot of people approach you and it's like, what do I need to do to be financially free, or to get this, or where should I invest the money? And they have all these very technical questions, right? But the reality is, like, it's especially when you're trying to build wealth or financial freedom, it's actually all stemming down to your core and the kind of emotional decisions you're making, and how centered you can stay. And when there's kind of swings in the pendulum of emotion and decisions come your way, what are you doing in that situation, right? And this is what I love about business as well, because it's taught me so much about staying calm, staying centered, and I've really got this approach now where I just kind of watch, right? I kind of just watch myself like a character going through life, and I kind of watched myself. The character bumps into this problem, and it's like, oh, what is he going to do? Is he going to A, do this, B, do this, C, do that? And I'm like, okay, well, actually, we'll choose A, that's the best route. Then this problem, okay, cool. Then this great thing happens. Okay, well, am I going to jump into that and make an emotional decision based on that, right? And business really challenges you, because anyone who's watching this, right, who's an entrepreneur, they will know it's an emotional roller coaster, right? And you'll go through it, and you'll have highs and lows, and the highs and lows are extreme. And you could have had your best financial day ever, and a week later you could bump into a huge problem which costs you twice as much as the financial payoff that you had the week prior, right? And it's trying to stay focused and having a long-term view of that. And for me, there's certain techniques that I use to stay focused. One of them is having a very long-term view. The same way that you approach the stock market, right? You don't just have a heart attack every time it drops 20%, and then you don't just crack open the champagne when it goes 20%. And I remember having lots of deep conversations with you about investing, more so about the psychology. And it was amazing to see your discipline through something like COVID, right? Where especially with crypto, where it was like bang, gone, like wealth down by 50%, right? And it was your mindset was just, I was like, Jason, have you seen the news? And you were like, yeah, it's just like whatever, it's normal. And I was thinking, how does he do that? How can you stay that calm throughout such big drops and highs and lows, and it's all about perspective, right? And it's the same with life. I think it's taught me so much about that. If you zoom out and just watch this unfold, you'll realise this is all just part of it. It's like this all the way along, and it's actually quite an exciting adventure that way. You kind of don't sign up to all the peaks and troughs. You're choosing just to say, like, there's the centered approach, right? Directionally correct.
Yeah. I see, I'm like you, I've watched people, and let's talk about watching from afar. You mentioned that people get swung around by emotional kind of oscillations, and that, if you are that sort of person, that's the first thing you need to deal with. Where if you're going to achieve anything in your life, you need to be able to wise up to good and bad events. And this will help you in your life, your business, your wealth building, your relationships, everything. People say that I'm calm and I'm balanced and, chilled and never get stressed, like you say about the stock market. The reason being is because I try to see the good and bad in every situation as quickly as possible. I think, like, literally the definition of wisdom is seeing the good and bad, how quickly you can see the good and bad in every situation. And if you can, like, if my house burnt down now, I can confidently say that my mind would be thinking, what do I need to do now? How can where do I need to go to live? Who do I need to call? It would not be, why is this happening to me? Oh my God, my whole, everything's done. I wouldn't be like that. And if you can get in a situation where something happens to you, like COVID with your business, everything comes crashing down. You're on an event, you take a call, and they say, our business has been wiped out overnight. Man, I laugh because I remember that. Like, I remember you messaging me, and you was the same. You was like laughing. Like, it was kind of, I've got to figure this out. This will be, you had this attitude of.
Well, during a 16-hour, like, there was like hour 15 with Dr. D Martini.
And I don't want to brush over the fact that, like, don't underestimate, like, the severity of that situation you was in. Just because we're humorous about it, I don't want anyone listening to think like your business went down the pan in like 24 hours. They closed you down. But it's about not seeing the good and bad. Now, where that plays out, I see a lot of people have strong emotional opinions on things, and I'm not saying you won't have a passion and a high value on something, but believing in wrong and right and good and bad, and not seeing, all that is to me is not being open-minded to see opportunity in disaster, and to see, the good that comes from bad and the bad that comes from good, and the kind of the contrast that you need to actually enjoy life. Because if everything was the same, I always say about the charts, if every trader had the same idea, the chart would just do this. There would be no opportunity, right? So it's the same in life. Like the only reason you're living a life that you enjoy, or you get to enjoy, or build something that you want to enjoy, is because there's contrast, is because there's someone who's got the opposite view to you, so you can serve them. If everyone figured their finances out, I wouldn't be teaching that. I wouldn't I wouldn't be bringing it. So it's really, really important. And I they see things in the news. You mentioned good and bad, and people getting upset and emotions. There's things that happen in the news, like crypto, or someone called Andrew Tate comes out, and people see this extreme bad or extreme good, right? And those things, those events, I try to just see, okay, well, that's what I believe is the kind of downside to that. That's what I see as the upside, and I just kind of form my own view on it and my own opinion with it. And when you do that, you don't allow other people to dictate your life and how you should think and what the decisions you should make. And I think that's a really important part of designing a life where you're in control of the outcome. Because if you're not mentally free, you cannot possibly become financially free or do anything that you actually want to do long term.
Yeah, totally. And I think one of the key things there is being non-reactive, right? One of the best pieces of advice my dad gave me growing up, which I'll never forget, was to sleep on it, and literally just to sleep on the big decisions, right? Because it's amazing how when you respond to a decision emotionally, how that damages your life over the long term, and the compounding effect of doing that all the time with all the big decisions that come in, personal life, business life, whatever it is. It's amazing how damaging that can be. Just by taking a time out to kind of sleep on it, you make a decision the next day, very fresh-minded, without being reactive. It's a game changer, and I think over time you understand that what feels like a big problem now, in a week, is probably forgotten about anyway, right? And so all these worries, anxiety, depression, all these things that influence people's lives and their emotional stability, a lot of it can just be eradicated by being more balanced, by watching yourself, having a different perspective, and neutralizing both positive and negative emotions, right? Something amazing happens, neutralize that. What's the negative that might come from that, right? For instance, if I have a really good sales day or whatever, financially does really well that day, I'll never make a financial decision or modify the forecast based on that, right? Because I know I'm coming from this massive abundance mindset where I can't lose and all that sort of stuff. I never make financial decisions when I'm in that mindset. If I'm in a scarcity mindset, I'm very careful to think, right, okay, well, I can leverage that mindset to think where I could make, cuts, financially. Can I cut the cost of that? Can I cut the cost of that, right? But I won't make big goals. So when I'm in a scarcity mindset, it's telling me to be careful about where I'm spending money. But it's not saying now's the time to make goals or to change the goal of the 5-year, 10-year, whatever it is, right? So it's leveraging different mindsets, and you can't do that unless you watch yourself and just take that moment to neutralize, both the highs and the lows.
Yeah, and the sleep on it thing's great. Really great advice. That's essentially a 24-hour period where you're just letting you're digesting. And going back to what I said, I would practice shortening that time. The best example I can give is let's just say that you walk in and you find your wife cheating or whatever, and you witness a bad event and things happening to you. Well, after that event, you might have a hate for women or men for a little while, and then you might be scared to go out on a dating scene, and you have a fear, and then kind of years down the line, if I went to you 20 years down the line, I would say, was that a bad event that happened? You'd be like, no, I met my new partner, I've got 2 kids, I wouldn't have had the life I had, we traveled the world, it was great. It was a great thing that happened. And it's gone from being the worst thing in that moment in time to 20 years later being the best thing that ever happened, right? So imagine if you could just shorten that to a minute.
Do you know what as well? I think in the Royal Marines they've got a mantra, right? Cheerfulness in the face of adversity, and this is something that's stayed with me for life. And it's I find a way of finding some sort of humour or some sort of uplifting cheerfulness in the lowest of times, right? And I think whenever you're in extreme, not just extreme sports, but anything in the extreme in terms of a community, right? You tend to see more of that. And I remember when I had the base jumping accident, one of the first messages I got from a friend of mine who was a base jumper in Sweden, a guy called Max, good mate of mine, he sent me a picture of his ankles and he said his ankles work fine. And this is the sort of banter I would get, right? And it's like, actually you kind of need that. You need that just because if you don't have a sense of humour as you go through all these peaks and troughs, it's one of those things that life becomes very, very arduous, right? And I remember, you and I had a chat just recently. It's a good example where you were in Dubai, and obviously you lost a decent amount of money in Dubai, or you think it was Dubai. But I don't know if it's definitely right, but basically some sort of fraudulent activity. It was about £10,000 or something stolen from you. And I remember messaging you saying, did you say thank you to the universe for that? Because obviously if it's triggered you, you probably attracted the life lesson, right? And you need to learn from it. So thank you, universe, for teaching me that.
Absolutely. And I think there is a lot to be said for this, and we could talk about this kind of topic for a long time. But it is, anyone who's watching, I guess what I would say to you is think back when a traumatic event happened to you personally, and you thought it just happened to you, and it was the worst thing, like Seb broke his legs. I'm sure that Seb breaking his legs in that tree, falling from, whatever height, I'm sure that was one of the best things that happened to him in life. And I'm sure that if you could think of anything that you think happened to you that you perceive to be bad at that moment in time, I bet you it's one of the best things that happened to you. I bet you can say, "Wow, that's the best thing."
One of the great examples of that is bullying, right? Like, I've written a book on bullying. I've done loads of work and introspective work on bullying, and mentored hundreds of kids through it and parents through it. And I was on live radio on Virgin in Dubai, over 1 million listeners, right? And I was doing this piece on bullying, and the last question of the show was, Seb, if you could go back and speak to those who bullied you when you were younger, what would be the one thing you would say? And I said, thank you. And I think the host was just like, well, I wasn't expecting that. And really, I think a lot of the listeners are going to be like, what is he on about? But the reality is, and that's kind of like black belt level introspective work, right? But I realised later, you need to take people through a journey of getting to that stage where they can understand that. And you start with the white belt content first, right? But the reality is, if I didn't go through bullying at that age, my confidence would be different, because ultimately you have to bring your courage up to a certain point where you can stand up for yourself. You change the pecking order because of your deliberate decisions based on your level of courage. And then it's like, okay, well, if I didn't have that courage, maybe I wouldn't have gone into entrepreneurship, into professional fighting, into whatever this. Maybe I wouldn't have the courage to go and build a family and find the right wife, and I wouldn't have the courage to start an organisation which mentors millions of children, not millions, thousands of children, not yet, thousands of children around the world, through bullying, through these big challenging transitions. And it's like, all those things that you go through are so important. You often just don't see it at the time, and that's where perspective comes in.
Totally, and we could talk about the bullying thing, and basically toxicity, I think, is a good topic to cover, because bullying. Let's start there. I guess my view on bullies is pretty much what you said. The bully almost doesn't exist. It's you are hurt by something when you don't love it about yourself, right? And when you're not sure about it yourself, and I know you can't tell kids this because they're too young to understand this, and you have to give them the white belt content first. But, if I was really overweight, or I had something on my face that I didn't like, or, whatever it might be, and someone was bullying me about it, it would only hurt if I didn't like it about myself, right? So the key is to love it about yourself, like empower yourself and own it and really embrace it, because there is no such thing as a bully. If I started a course, I'll build a course like how to stop being a bully, I would get 0 attendees, like, because no one thinks they're a bully. No one thinks I'm a bully. It doesn't exist. So all you get is a kid who wants to pick on you about something based on his upbringing and his beliefs and his values and how his parents have treated him, right? So what he thinks is an important thing to shout out. And because you don't love it, it hurts you. And that is really important at the moment, because now we're on the realms of social media where there are people looking up to people worrying about being cancelled, people being bullied on DMs and hateful comments and all these kind of things. I want to talk a little bit about that because you've experienced that. You work in that every day. And I think it's a really important topic right now, because when you was talking about, try and see the bad in the good and the good in the bad, a lot of the time, if you have a big winning day, like I remember I did a 100K day, right? 2 years ago yesterday, I did a 100K day on my trading. And I was feeling a little bit cocky. Like, even when you practice this stuff, you feel a little bit cocky. You feel like the world, the world's yours for the taking for a little bit. And some people will say, well, the wife or the family or whoever would be like, well, don't get too cocky, or don't make sure you manage it wisely, or whatever, or they'll put some kind of downward slant spin on it. And for a lot of people, what I see out there now is, oh, don't get around toxic people. She's trying to, take the wind out of my sails. She's toxic. She's negative. What she's doing is trying to balance out your emotions, or what your friends are doing, they're trying to balance. A lot of the time, it's because you're not seeing something. And if you just sat there and think, why does that hurt? Why does that hurt me? It's because you don't like it about yourself. There's a lot of truth in it. And it pays to listen to that, because if you just surround yourself with positivity and you believe in this whole toxic thing, which I just don't believe in toxic relationships. I don't.
Well, a lot of it
to tango.
I think a lot of it is, watching when you're getting triggered and asking yourself, why does that trigger me, right? And I think with a lot of bullying that people experience, and like you said, the reality is they don't love a certain trait about themselves, right? If you really believe that you are short or you're overweight or whatever, and you don't love that about yourself, you're likely going to attract bullies into your life, because you will respond to them and the things they say as something that triggers you. And so you've got 2 choices. You can change who you are and change those things about you. Obviously, some things you can't change, right? Like there's genetic traits which you just can't change. But other things, it's like, well, okay, you can either choose to change it, or you can own that about yourself, right? And really embody that and be proud of it, and say that that's why you're unique, and find the strength within that, because we're all very, very different for a reason. And I think that for a lot of people, they want to be the same so they can eradicate anything which might be negative. But ultimately, it just comes down to them not having done the introspective work to understand what triggers them in the first place. People are triggered every single day on social media, right? And they don't ask themselves, why am I triggered? They just react, and they're in that reactive mode. And it's like, there's actually something to learn here. There's a lesson. You're being triggered for a reason, so you can learn something about this, which might be able to help you in your life.
Yeah. So interesting. And on that topic, I haven't ever spoken about masculine toxicity or, Andrew Tate. I've never really come out publicly and had a solid opinion, and I've seen a lot of posts, obviously, about it. But again, it really just goes back to seeing the grounded center of it all. I think we're in a time right now where things are getting out of control. There's a guy who raped 2 women and goes to trial and then chooses to change his gender so he can go to a woman's prison, and then they go and send him to a woman's prison. This kind of stuff is getting out of control. And what I would say is people like Andrew Tate show up. And although, extreme, right? But I just see it as a balancing mechanism.
Yeah.
It's like,
it's interesting because, someone like Andrew Tate, right? He very, very cleverly presses on a bruise which benefits him commercially. But the reality is the bruise was there before Andrew Tate. And, you look at,
exactly.
Toxic masculinity is a really interesting topic, right? What is toxic masculinity? So many people, it's a term which is thrown around, but so few people can actually articulate what that actually means, right? Toxic masculinity are certain traits, typically, stereotype that the male has those masculine traits, or it's not just the male who could have those masculine traits, the female could have that too. And it's things like homophobia, homophobic statements, it's misogyny, it's saying to another guy to man up, and I think there's a lot of emotional repression and all this sort of stuff which comes into it. Overuse of violence. But what's kind of happened is, this term has been thrown around so much that it's got to the stage now where anything masculine is kind of demonized, right? And so what I find is that you've got young men growing up who experience testosterone for the first time. They've got all these feelings, these masculine feelings, and it's like, where do they put all this energy? And they're told that those feelings you're feeling are toxic. And it's almost anti-masculine what's going on. And there are certain things that, we can detoxify, if you like. And I think that there's an element of gender equality, that people feel they can achieve through the detoxification of masculinity. But the reality there is, it's gone too far. And so everything just seems toxic that a guy can do, right? And so that leaves a generation lost. See, my approach here is, rather than saying to a young man, this is toxic, you shouldn't be doing that, you shouldn't be doing this, you shouldn't be doing that. Why don't we instead say, here are the innate, positive masculine traits. Here's, masculine positivity. Things like courage, leadership, protectiveness of your family. These sorts of traits that, grit, hard work, determination, that, we feel that, the masculine energy kind of embodies through everything in life. And it's like, why don't we focus on painting a picture of what positivity through masculinity looks like, rather than trying to bring masculinity down through this term of toxic masculinity?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's about it's the same as a bullying thing, right? It's about empowering the positives over a kind of more sustainable period of time than going polar opposite, good and bad, good and bad, good and bad.
We both got kids, right? When you're raising your kids, you don't say to them, don't do this, don't do that, don't do this. You get a much better result by saying, this is great. We should work towards this. This is who you should become. And I think as a father, you do that through your actions, right? Through your standards, and your standards are what you pass down to your son. And I think that's something for them to grow into. Constantly degrading masculinity is really dangerous. And so I think by doing that, we've got this kind of, blanket approach to gender now, where it's almost like you're kind of shunned if you're masculine, or you're almost shunned if you're feminine. And it's like, I see women being criticized for being stay-at-home mums. It could be that is deep in their values to want to stay home, to look after the home, to raise children at home, and to make that, their complete focus in life. And for any stay-at-home mum, it's a hell of a job. But that is a full-time, more than a full-time job, right? In a lot of ways, way more stressful than a 9 to 5. Yeah. And it's almost like what I would almost call toxic femininity, where people turn around and say, you should be out there working, you shouldn't be at home, all this sort of stuff. And it's like, why are we not embracing the things that make us all very unique, and embracing true femininity and true masculinity and how they benefit society, right? We kind of degrade masculinity so much to the point where we don't realize the benefits, right? And I was having this really deep conversation with my wife about it, because I was like, there's certain things you shouldn't say, like boys would be boys, right? And it's like, if I look at my son in nursery, he is so physical, and all the other boys in his nursery, you've met him, right? All the other boys in his nursery are so physical. They want to run around, get money, push each other over, play fight, all this sort of stuff. And of course, you shouldn't say boys will be boys, because what that then does, the concept there is that these young boys grow up thinking it's okay to be over physical, it's okay to be aggressive. But then on the flip side, we need aggression. We need these young men to grow up and learn how to use aggression to protect people, right? One of the things Andrew Tate says is, you don't want, if you're being robbed, you don't want someone to come up, to try and save the day, a police officer or whatever, who's not able to show aggression and to neutralize the attacker. So, how do we teach that to young boys? And I think a lot of that comes down to, to giving them the right tools, the right role model, and showing them aggression is a very, very good, powerful force for good if it's used in the right way. If it's used to, protect, if it's used to, to look after people around you, if it's used to stop an attack, or this sort of stuff, right? Which takes a lot of steering, and that's a lot of the stuff we do in the Warrior Academy. And one of the other things, Andrew Tate says, which I actually disagree with, is he says, and I know where he's coming with this, but it can be misconstrued so easily by a young man, right? He says, men shouldn't show emotions. And he says that when men show emotions, what happens? Well, they're more aggressive, there's more violence. If they're told to show emotions, there's all these, shootings and all this horrible stuff happens, right? And for me, and this kind of stems back to everything we've just been talking about emotions, we are human beings. We all have emotions, and we need to understand that. However, from a male point of view, your life is probably going to be pretty tough. You're going to be challenged physically by other males as you grow up, and then into adulthood as well. That's the most likely result for you in your life, right? And you're going to experience very strong emotions. But I've got a very stoic approach to how I teach this, and I really feel like it's about observing those emotions, asking yourself why you feel them, the whole triggering piece, and then saying, okay, how can I leverage those emotions to benefit me? It's not about disregarding your emotions entirely. If you try and disregard your emotions, that's when you suddenly, you react and you don't understand where it's coming from. True strength and true character and true masculinity is understanding where your emotions come from, neutralizing them, and then leveraging them to your ability.
Yeah, 100%. Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. So we've covered some ground. I guess what I'd love to kind of just segue into as we round off is people listening to this show is about living a life that you want to build, that you feel inspired to live, to have the freedom of choice, to be always free mentally, free from good and bad, bad and evil, good and evil, free financially, free spiritually, free to basically embody everything that is high on your values and build a life that's, because that's ultimately what we're here for. We're here to enjoy it and make the most of this short time on the rock. So a lot of the people listening to this want to build the best life, and they want to go into business and entrepreneurship and they want to build wealth, and they want to, they want to take the path, but they're facing all of these problems, and they're facing all of these challenges in the changing world and the crazy business dynamic that we're in at the moment, and it's definitely going for a shift. So with that said, what are important things that people need to focus on, in your opinion, in order to have the best business, the best future in wealth building, career, life? It's a big question.
Yeah, I'll give it a good shot. I think the first thing is perspective, right? Like, you need perspective in life. You need to have a long-term view of life, of where you're going, of your business, because that stops you from worrying so much about the highs and lows of the day to day. I think the next thing is you need to have a purpose beyond making money. One of the things I always say is if everything is tied to money, right? If you value yourself based on how much you earn or how much you've got in the bank or how your business is doing financially, and that's your sole purpose, then I feel like that makes you quite weak, because it's very easy for things to happen outside your control, which suddenly hit you, and now it's like, oh, what a disaster, we've had a terrible year. Well, actually, if you exist for a reason beyond making money, how many people have you impacted? How many lives have you changed? I mean, even if it's your own, right? I mean, it's existing for a reason.
Your families.
Right, exactly. And existing for a reason beyond making money is from a business owner's point of view, can be a total game changer for your employees, for you as the owner, for your customers. I think when you exist for a reason beyond making money, you get so much more fulfillment from your business, and so, it's like you might have a disastrous year financially, but you may have one of the best years from an impact point of view, right? And so, we give a huge amount of profit from the Warrior Academy towards the Bates Foundation, where half our students are now in developing countries. And it's amazing when I look back and I think, the days in my business where I've been like, wow, that has been one of the most positive days in my life. But one of the days where, and I think you and I worked on this together a bit as well, was when we gave 25,000 meals within 24 hours to the Philippines during the floods and the tsunami there, right?
Yeah.
And I remember, when days where I made 6 figures in one day, and I've been like, wow, top of the world, this is amazing. But it hasn't compared. It's pale in insignificance compared to the feeling of watching the pictures and the videos flooding of lives you're literally changing. And so I think if you're able to tie that together into your business, and this business becomes this force for good, which just changes lives, and you can even do that if you can build something which exists after you die, it's like you've left the place, better than when you found it. I think that's really an amazing approach to business. So there's perspective.
Yeah,
Sorry, go on.
Sorry. I was just going to say on that point, if you just hold that thought, a lot of people focus on making a load of money, and that's the goal, right? And they do anything and hustle and scratch and claw and all this to get to this kind of money goal, right? But how about just figuring out how you love to live and then how to get paid doing that instead? Because even if it's like 10 times less than the amount you've got in your head, who cares? Because you're free, because you're living, right? And I'll just give a quick example. I know a guy who's very shrewd with YouTube, and he didn't want to go and work in a corporate. His dad wanted him to go into a corporate. He loved skiing. He loved playing computer games. He loved doing some other bits and pieces, I think motorbikes. All he did was just start YouTube channels on all 3 of those because he was doing them anyway, right? So he'd just ski down a mountain and film it, and he'd do a top to bottom review of a hill. He then went out on his motorbike and filmed that on a GoPro and reviewed the bike, and then he did computer games and did a Twitch. And then after a period of time, they become businesses, and then the ad rev from those start to fund him just doing that. And now all of a sudden he's going skiing with his family, he's playing his computer games, and he's on his motorbike going around doing bits and pieces, and he's just being paid. That is financial freedom.
That is freedom.
And that's the benefit of the world we live in today, right? You've got the opportunity to go and do that. 50 years ago, maybe less than that, you wouldn't have had that opportunity. There's no way you would have made the money doing that, right? So I think there's huge amounts of opportunity there people can grasp. But and this is the funny thing as you go through this, right? You go through the Tears of Freedom program, you learn all this stuff. And for me, it was it's a case of sorry, videographer's having a heart attack. When you go through this, it's a case of freedom's kind of an inside job, right? It's like actually you had everything inside you to be free. You just had to just think about your life differently and stop chasing the things that don't actually matter to you. Because the reality is, so many people chase the job which pays them more, that they want a higher net worth. Why? What do you actually need that? Like, what is it that's actually going to improve your life and improve your lifestyle? If I work at this job for the next 20 years, then I'll be financially free. But what if you scale back, change the country you live in, live somewhere else, and you change the living expenses, whatever, so you drop that down and pursue things you actually care about? Suddenly, within a year, your life can be different. And that's what I learned from the Tears of Freedom program, right? It teaches you how to change your lifestyle based on your true values and your core values, and which for me is so important, and that's why it's why it's got such a strong following, right? Because they see so many quick changes because their mindset shifts. So the two bits of advice so far are perspective, long-term view over your whole life. The next is have a reason to exist beyond making money, and the next thing is in terms of risk taking, right? So many people don't have the courage to take risks, and it's a real shame because some of them have incredibly creative ideas, and they could literally be in a different place in a year from now if they just took the decision to take that leap. And they procrastinate, and for me, procrastination is a form of cowardice. You're deliberately not putting yourself out there out of fear of whether or not it could fail or what people's opinions would be, right? And so, for me, and I think you and I are very, very prolific, right? We come up with an idea and we throw it out there quickly. And we know, 8 out of 10 of those ideas are going to land, 2 of them are going to fail. And the reality is, because we're so prolific with this, it just compounds over time. And it's about making very, very quick decisions and getting it out there. And I think for people who are struggling to take risks, one of the things I would say is, anything you're lingering on right now, get it done within a week. Say to yourself, right, I'm giving myself 7 days to do it. I'm going to execute the plan. I'm just going to get it done. And whatever happens, happens, right? And the other thing I would say is, you're not going to die, right? A lot of the decisions we're making, if you had to scale back the kind of worries and concerns we have nowadays compared to what they had, a few thousand years ago or even less. You're running from tigers, you're trying to find shelter in a cave, or when am I next going to eat? My family going to survive the night? It's this sort of stuff, right? And we've got such comfy, cushy lives as human beings nowadays that any little blip of fear it paralyzes us. And that was one of the beautiful things about base jumping for me, because I was making life-death decisions very, very quickly every single day. And when you're faced with such severe outcomes to a wrong decision, you're in that flow state as well. It's like the rest of your life, all the small decisions you make become very easy to make. The kind of things that would paralyze some people just kind of bounce off you. Okay, well, I'll just do that. You see the other options because you're more balanced. And so I think, saying to yourself, is this really a dangerous risk? What's the worst case scenario that's going to happen if I do take this risk? You're not going to die. You'll probably be all right. How long will it take you to recover from that? Probably a week, probably less for most people, right? And so for me, there's kind of 3 big bits of advice would be, long-term view perspective, have a reason to exist beyond making money, and take risks. Just do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Solid advice. They really are kind of universal principles of succeeding at life, and then I would just go on to say, in terms of business and strategy and things like that, from what I've seen, I was an electrician, I was an electrical engineer, and one day I decided to start learning and building my knowledge and learning how to invest and learning how to build businesses. And then this social media thing came along, and I decided to just start talking to a camera. And the day I started talking to a camera, it took me 4 hours to record a 4-minute video. And I'll play the video at the end of this show. And I promise you, it was the most uncomfortable thing I'd done in a very long time. I had big sweat patches under my arms, and it was awful. But I got it done, and then the thing went out, and I was all smiles, and it looked edited and polished, and it looked great, right? And from that day on, just by being able to get my message out to people quickly and far and wide via this platform has been the most, significant. It's contributed to the growth of business more than anything that I could ever have comprehended, because you're now able to reach people that you couldn't reach before. You're now able to resonate with people and build communities and, fans, and you're able to serve people further and wider. So, that is, use social media, use this tool, use this platform that you've got for free. It really is incredible. And that, I guess we just want to mention something we've been working on together, Seb, is Shield, right? So we believe in this so much that we've now, put our teams together to help other people get their message out far and wide via social media, and, give back the time to the person who's got the value to deliver, whilst they take care of pushing your message out far and wide to the world, so that you can have the life that you love and build the wealth that you want to build.
I think for a lot of people, when it comes to social media, they spend so much time on it, right? It's like there are much better things you could be doing, but it's constructing your message, it's understanding the customer's pain points, it's articulating your purpose, why you exist, how you can help, and it's being authentic and getting your story out there. It's what you should be doing. But then that's what entrepreneurs should be doing. But instead, they're at home, editing lots of videos, writing the subtitles, making captions, this sort of stuff you can build a team to do. And it's, I don't see them as entrepreneur tasks unless you're a complete startup with no money at all and you've got loads and abundance of time. But as you start to grow and develop, if you want to go from good to great, that's something you have to outsource, right? You've got to build a team around you to do it. And I think that's where Shield comes in. and it's helped so many people through what it's doing. You know, if you look at some of the stories we've had through Shield of, you know, startups joining us, and you look at them now, and it's incredible. You know, they've had the courage to put their face out there, right? And just in the same way that you had the courage to sit down and make that 1 minute video, whatever it was, which took you 4 hours to film, and you pushed through that uncomfortability, and because of that, it's transformed your life, right? And you've been able to help so many thousands of people because of it.
Yeah.
And we see that with the clients at Shield, who have got the courage to put their face out there, who have got the courage to say, I'm going to really double down on, especially video content. You know, one of the things I always say is, you know, if you want to build trust with people, video content is what you need to focus on. You know, a photo, you know, says 1,000 words, and a video says 1,000 pictures, right? It's like, you know, video content is what people want to see. You know, so that's really what we're focusing on with Shield. You know, really doing high volume video work and really capturing your story and getting it out there.
Yeah, and as you say, it's not just the external benefits of the kind of reviews and money and wealth and all that. It's the internal benefits of the accountability to actually get better and better at articulating your message and really connecting with people and then changing lives. So our goal through Shield is literally to change millions and millions of lives, because we're going to be not only changing the lives of the clients, but all of the people that they're speaking to. Lives will be changed because of Shield enabling them to be very, very prolific.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, that's incredible, isn't it? I mean, one of the things I always say about the Warrior Academy is, you know, our legacy is not just what our students will do in the dojo, right? All the classes and stuff they'll do. It's what the students are going to do when they leave, which is
how they raise their kids.
It's the impact of planting these seeds. You know, 20 years down the line, I know I'm going to get messages from these students who say, like, you know, I trained with you, you taught me this, and now I'm doing this in the world, and I'm setting myself up to have, you know, a lifetime of pride based on what these guys are going to go and do. And I think it ties in well with what we're doing with Shield, right? We're helping amazing business owners really find their voice and really get themselves out there so they can serve more people. And I think that's going to be the legacy of Shield, right? You know, it's not what they do this year. It's the compounding effect of all these people really being authentic and getting their content out there, which is going to help so many people.
Yeah, amazing. I'm looking forward to doing that with you, man. And yeah, it's going to be a great journey. So wrapping up, I know we're really over time. So if you guys want to find out more about Seb and his work, Seb, quickly, where can they find you, mate?
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram, seb.bates, or go to my website, sebastianbates.com. Or if you want to book me for speaking or a podcast or anything like that, it'd be a pleasure to be on a podcast with you guys. Then it's ea@sebastianbates.com, and Sarah will book it in.
Awesome. And all the links for that will be below this or around this video somewhere. And mate, I just want to say thanks for coming on. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. And until next time, guys, take care. Have a great rest of your day. And I'll see you then. Yeah. From 8 a.m. GMT, that's wrong. From 8 a.m. on the 1st, we're inviting you. Oh man, I'm never going to get this.
All I know is you should never give up.
No, exactly. Come and join us on the 1st of December. Sign up on the link below. Leave your name and your email address, and you can come in and enjoy a free week from the 1st of December to the 4th. And if it's something you... Come and join us on the 1st of December. The link below. Come and join us on the 1st of December. Sign up on the link below and get a free week to the London Live Trading Room. Come and join us on the 1st of December. Click on the link in the... Come and join us on the 1st of December. Click on the link below and sign up for the free week from the 1st to the 4th. And we look forward to seeing you then. Come and join us on the 1st of December. Click on the link below. Sign up for the free week of the London Live Room from the 1st to the 4th of December. And what have you got to lose? We'll look forward to seeing you then.